Um, it's very interesting to me. There are pockets within the city that talk about overcrowding. That's not a universal idea that is brought about, and I'll tell you why. There's certain places in the city, particularly certain parts of Queens, where classes are overcrowded. Right now, our average class size, if your child is in kindergarten through the second grade, you know what the average class size is? 22. 22. That's not an overly large class. People think about, when people hear overcrowded, they think they're like 40 kids sitting in a room, packed, right? 22. In fact, the new class size bill that was just signed says they want the class size to be 20, right? We're already at 22. Most of our classes around the city are not overcrowded. Part of the reason for that is the amount of folks who've left New York City and left our schools. In the 5 years prior to my becoming chancellor, we lost 120,000 families have left our New York City public schools.
That was my next question.
Yeah. And then in fact, the 2 years prior to my coming here, we lost 70,000. The good news is that we are stemming the tide on that. We projected this year we were going to lose about another 30,000. We lost less than 15,000. So if that trend continues, we are starting to reverse this and put ourselves in a better position. So I'm very happy about that, number one. But for the classes which in fact are overcrowded, we will be building new spaces. We'll be expanding more classrooms to meet the needs of those families. And in part because we're now going to be legally mandated to do that because of the class size bill that was just developed. The mayor and I stood against the class size bill, not against, trying to reduce overcrowding, but using it as a mandate. Because the research tells us that your greatest impact in reducing overcrowding happens in elementary school. What's much more important in the older grades is teacher quality. Because I could give you a great teacher and put them in a room with 35 kids, and they will outperform the kids with 20 in a room and a mediocre teacher. You see? And so we were fighting for that, for at least for the school to have a level of flexibility. Because what that is going to mean now going forward is that if you're the principal of a school and you decided with your budget that your parents really wanted another art or music program added, and yet your second grade class has 21 students in it, you will not have the discretion of the decision. You will have to hire the additional classroom teacher, mandated by law. That's the challenge. But there's no chancellor who would stand against reducing crowded classes. So that's number one. Number two, safety has been an issue in our communities. We've been very fortunate. The number of safety incidents in our schools has not increased appreciably at all. Our schools have been the safe havens for our young people. The problem is when we see all these incidents, they happen right outside the school, around the corner, up the block, once the kids are actually out back in the community. And that's a body of work that we work together with the mayor, the police department, and community leaders as well to reduce. We continue to tell the message that the safety of our children is the responsibility of the entire village. So when you ask me about parent involvement, and I deeply believe in parent involvement, I say to parents all the time as well. Parent involvement is not just simply, I want to meet with the chancellor and tell them what I think. Parent involvement is also coming together and organizing a safety patrol on behalf of your children. When the school day is over, it's not just the police. It's not just the chancellor's office. It's parents. Parents can come out before the school day begins and when the school day is over. Not every parent can do it, and you don't need every parent. But you need a contingent of parents who will come out and say, we're gonna station ourselves around the school and make sure that we are going to keep our children safe. We all work together. And I think that's the message that I'm trying to highlight, is that it's not us and them. It's all of us working together on behalf of our kids. I think the notion of teacher training is something really important. I'm going to come back to you in 1 second on that because it connects to the final point that I did want to make. But communications, critically important. I have said this to our superintendents on a regular basis, and they're getting this. Our schools are part of communities. If you are not stepping out of the four walls of that school and making sure that you're engaging the parents and the families, elected officials, all of it, community leaders, community organizations, then you are not being the superintendent that I'm looking for. They understand that message. They are out there in the communities. It's a beautiful thing to see. All of this stuff takes time, but we are moving in the right direction. We are working here at Tweed to change the narrative. Part of the reason I'm doing this interview is it gives us an opportunity to change the narrative. So much of the narrative is a negative narrative about our schools, about the incidents that one might see, or a poor performance at a particular school, and so we hear that. That's always in the media. What we don't hear enough of are the wonderful and amazing things. New York City has some of the most phenomenal schools that you will see anywhere in the nation. Wide range, career technical education. Kids who go to school learning to become pilots, going to school learning to become chefs. I visited a restaurant 2 weeks ago where the kids who graduated from the school were now the chefs at a local restaurant, high-end restaurant. They were learning this while they were in high school. It is absolutely amazing. The problem is that we're not doing enough of it. And I'll tell you the bigger challenge, and it connects finally to this piece around parent involvement, not parent involvement, but teacher training. It's funny you say these are the 5 things that you've heard the most: overcrowding, safety, parent involvement, teacher training, communication. You want to know the one thing that very rarely gets asked of me as chancellor, which everybody should be asking? How come our kids can't read, right? Only 49% of the students in New York City are on grade level in reading. And for black and brown children, it's only 65% of black and brown children are not on grade level. Think about that. We have over $30 billion budget, and only 35% of black and brown kids are able to read on their grade level. And it's amazing because everywhere I go, nobody ever asks me about it. They ask me about, like you just put in, overcrowding or communications. The number one thing on the list should be, why do we struggle to ensure that our kids are literate and can read? There's a guy, he hangs out in front of our building on a daily basis. He's been doing it for over a decade. Bill Gurian is his name. He was an educator from Ohio and he moved to New York. And he stands there with a sign that says, if we would just teach the kids to read. And I met him on my very first day as chancellor. And I told him, I fully agree with you. He said it would solve all your problems. You wouldn't have to worry about so many of these other issues we worry about. We're kind of playing around on the margins because we're missing what the core. If this school system doesn't do anything else, it's supposed to ensure that your child is literate. Everything else is by extension. But we miss the fundamental core of what our mission is. And I believe there's a reason for that, because that was not always the case. You know, years ago when I went to school and when my dad went to school, my dad would tell me that, you know, you went to schools in New York City, you learned to read. Even if you came from a poor neighborhood, you learn to read. You might not have all the opportunities for career advancement down the line, but you learn to read. And 25 to 30 years ago, we got away from the basic approach that we took to how we actually teach kids to read. It's called the science of reading. Many of us know it as phonics, right? But it's phonics, and it's making sure that all of our kids get access to grade level content work. So we're not just constantly dumbing it down, the curriculum, and how our kids just engage in remedial stuff all the time, which speaks to expectation. See, if you don't think kids are up to the task, then you give them baby work to do. Right. And they're in the 5th grade and you're giving them 1st and 2nd grade work to do. But my expectation is much greater than that. And now we're going to retrain all of our teachers around reading, literacy. It then connects to math as well. But you've got to have the fundamentals of reading have got to be down. Young people have to have a level of confidence that they know that they can read, so that then they learn to become critical thinkers, critical readers, and then they read to learn as opposed to learning to read. All the research says if you don't get on grade level by 3rd grade, you're going to fight an uphill battle for the rest of your time in school. So that's what my focus is, and no matter where I go, nobody ever asks me anything about it. They ask me about overcrowding, safety, teacher training. They're missing the fundamental core issue, which is, Mr. Chancellor, what are you going to do to ensure that my child is literate? If they become literate, the possibilities for what they can do in their life are limitless. That's why you have a Positive Community Magazine. Positive Community Magazine is of no value if a child and a person can't read it, right? And so we've gotten so many of our young people who are grown up and they don't have a strong literacy base. My theme for this administration is Bright Starts and Bold Futures. Bright Starts and Bold Futures. I hope you print that. Bright Starts and Bold Futures. And Bright Starts is our literacy work, and the Bold Futures is our career pathways. Young people need to know, why are you going to school in the first place? What do we ultimately want you to be able to do and achieve in your own life? And if you know that one day we're giving you the skills necessary for you to not just go to college, but if you decide you don't want to go to college, I want to become a journalist, but I don't want to go to college. I want to become a photographer. I want to become a chef. I want to become whatever it is that your heart desires to be, that you are getting the skill development on a daily basis in our schools. They're going to prepare you for that. That's the point of being here. Otherwise, you're just going to school every day, which is very different than being educated. The routinization of just you go to school and you go into a classroom and you ask a young person, tell me about what you're working on now, and they say, I'm doing my work. Doing my work means, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm just doing this because I'm being compliant because the teacher said I have to do this. But I don't know what it means. I don't know how it connects to my life. I'm just trying to, I'm trying not to cause a ruckus in class. There are far too many of our kids who are just going to school, but without real purpose of what it actually could mean for their lives. Because if we help kids to understand that, then you don't have to talk to them about not bringing weapons to school and being engaged in negative behavior. Kids who see the power of possibility for themselves move very differently than kids who do not. Kids who are moving day to day, living in the dark, engaged and are susceptible to very negative behavior. And then we spend millions and billions of dollars trying to fix that behavior. But if we help them to see the light from the very beginning, it fixes itself. That's what I'm trying to do here. It's a complicated notion, but it won't happen unless we at least start the process, and that's what we're trying to do.